Good deal. So, this talk is about how to make a knowledge base using Flare and Feedback Server, and I originally got interested in this because for a year, about 7 or 8 years ago, I administered the knowledge base for Plumtree Software in the city, in the financial district, when they were down there on Sansom. And I was a writer, and then I did, my regular projects. But I first thing I did there was clean up their knowledge base, and then so I stayed on as the administrator. And I worked with one of these out-of-the-box knowledge bases, and I just saw a lot of obstacles and some problems that we had there with getting developers to write the articles, and then the different bottlenecks that we would almost always encounter before getting them published, and how, just like anything, it's like the process. They try to make it look like it can be made through using the software, but really the processes and procedures need to be made and agreed upon, outside of the tool in a meeting or in a talk or something. And anyway, so I saw some of the problems with using the out-of-the-box tool, and I saw some of the annoyances and all that. And then I got interested in Flare. Well, I started using Flare when it first came out in the beta version, because I'd been into RoboHelp, and, I was using FrameMaker and all that. But then when the feedback server came out, I thought this could be a good solution. Well, meanwhile, I'm sure like 300 people had already implemented it this way. But so I did a project recently and implemented for a company a knowledge base using the combination. And what I hope to address by going through this is some of the problems, some of the things I ran into, and I made up a guide, a little document that puts everything together. Because I found that if you want to go out and if you ever want to do this for your company or do it for somebody, everything's there in the MadCap documentation and in their site. But it took a lot of time to kind of string together the string of pearls, just figuring out what to do first and next. And so this was just an effort to kind of put it all together. And I put a PDF together. It's like 5 pages long, and put it out. I think Scott put it out on the website tonight. So if you want to look at this after, I'm just going to go through that with you all, and then we can talk about some of the complications and things I would do differently the next time. So basically, by combining Flare and Feedback, when creating a company knowledge base, you provide the improved communication between your writers, your customers, and your employees. And once you establish the network within your larger network by installing Feedback, the Feedback Explorer, Feedback Administration, and configuring these as well as Flare, then your Flare projects become interactive. And with Feedback, you can make your knowledge base with Flare, but then with Feedback, users can add comments and they can rate the topics. And if you see on this Welcome to the MadCap Software Knowledge Base up on the screen, the little yellow stars, that's the rating capability there. And then at the bottom of this screen, you see the comments section. So someone wrote a comment there, Flare 6, Scott, on 3/4/2010. So you can also go in and add comments here. Once you add the comment, then it goes to somebody, and they have to decide whether or not to post it. But we'll talk more about that in a minute. So they can rate the topics, add comments, and then writers can analyze what users are searching on. And I found that to be very helpful. I thought, in a way, with this kind of functionality, you can get the same kind of information that you would get if you had the luxury of doing usability studies or talking to support people and the customers. And after publishing, you can get a lot of information, and you can put a lot of information out and make it available without having to republish. So I think that's kind of nice. As far as the searching, you can add synonyms. So if somebody's searching on couch, but you've used sofa throughout your doc, you can just look in this, one of the pieces that we're going to talk about installing here, and you can see that, and you can make one change, and then every time they say couch and your documentation says sofa, it will display the the results. So it helps with getting your users' needs met without having to republish, and to be able to really have a growing interactive knowledge base. So first of all, you have to install the feedback server. And if you go here to this knowledge base, they have articles here. If you go down to feedback, they have some things here on installation. And they also have an installation checklist. But you can also go back to the MadCap site, technical support, and you can go here to system requirements, select feedback, and click go, and then you can find out what your server needs to have. Like, it needs to be 32-bit, not 64-bit, etc. It tells you all the requirements. So then you can look at that and go by your server. And then the next thing, you would go to the checklist, the installation checklist over here, and put in feedback, click go, and you're going to find out what all you need to do, basically close everything before you install. And when you buy feedback, MadCap sends you an email with all the information that you need, for the most part, keys and everything, and you would just close everything and then, download from that email. And then last but not least, there's a really good Getting Started guide. So if you go to that Getting Started guide and select feedback here and click go, you're going to get a very comprehensive long document, but I would go ahead and say skip the first 12 pages. I don't think there's anything in those first 12 pages that you really need to know. It mentions Microsoft.NET framework and how you need to install it, but most of us are going to notice that that's already installed with the later versions of Windows that we'd be using. Also, there's a little bit of an interesting thing in the email. They talk about downloading the actual feedback server. You need to make sure you do that before trying to download the feedback server admin application. It's not that clear, but that was just a little bit of a kink. It's pretty obvious. Once the feedback server is installed on the physical server, so once you do that, then you're going to see there's a feedback server admin and a feedback server explorer icon on that server desktop. So you've installed that feedback explorer on the server. However, each writer, administrator, or topic reviewer, everybody who's going to want to see what's going on with the knowledge base, is going to need to also download feedback explorer on their computers. So the other thing that's good to know is that for every project, there can be one or more targets. So you have a project called, all of your topics. And then you might be having, you might have one topic you might have one target, for PDF, and then you might have another target for your web help. So that every target that you want tied to the feedback server needs to have a configured feedback file. And that's something that's kind of tricky and difficult to figure that out from the guides that they have online and everything. But that's just the basic premise, is that if you have 4 different versions of web help, one for your customers, one for your intranet, one other for something else and another for that, and say if you want feedback attached to all of those things and you want people to be able to comment, rate, and everything, then you're going to need 4 different configuration files. So one writer is going to need to make those for each of the targets, and then they're going to need to send them to all of the other writers, and they're going to need to save them to a certain location that I'll tell you more about in a minute. But that's real important. So everybody needs to have the configuration file on their hard drive. So the writer making the configured feedback file needs to download the Feedback Explorer, which is pretty easy to do, and then create the configured feedback file. So how they do that is open the targets